The year is 1995, and the revolutionary, groundbreaking manga series Dragon Ball has just come to an end. To the overwhelming sadness of Japanese schoolchildren, fans, and surely eventually the entire country of Mexico. Fast forward 5 years, it's now the turn of the century, and Dragon Ball's legendary creator Akira Toriyama releases a new project. But it wasn't another long-running series that would take years to complete. Instead, it took just a few months and consisted of just 14 chapters total. It's called Sandland, and I just finished reading it. I haven't mentioned it before, but my New Year's resolution this year was to pick up a new hobby. One that would help cut down my TikTok and social media screen time, because that shit can get fucking ridiculous sometimes. I ultimately decided to start reading some manga. And since then, I've been making my way through so many amazing stories, including finally getting into Dragon Ball. So by sheer coincidence, I stumbled upon Sandland, and given it was made by Toriyama and its incredibly short length, I decided to give it a quick read. And well, it's kinda stuck with me ever since. Maybe I'm just a bit fucking sentimental because technically speaking, it's the first manga series I've ever completed. Or maybe it's something more than that. So I've ultimately decided to make a video on it, explore it all over again, and take you along for the ride. Of course, just like my other review recap style videos, we are going to be going through the entire series, so spoilers ahead. But with that out of the way, let's take a look at a truly underrated piece of Toriyama's catalog. Let's talk about Sandland. Our story opens quite fittingly on a desolate desert landscape, as we are introduced to a group of demons. Yes, actual demons. We'll discuss that in a moment. They're just sitting around, shooting the shit, huddled around playing a Game Boy looking thing. That is, until they are informed by their lookout that it's time, and they get right to work. Because you see, one of the king's water transport trucks is passing through, and they sure want that shit. They disable the truck with minimal effort, causing the driver to hop out, and he immediately, without hesitation, unloads his handgun on our boy here. Luckily, it has little effect on demons, prompting the driver to yell to his partner to get the holy water. As soon as I found out that in this universe the king's soldiers are issued fucking super soakers filled with holy water in case of demon run-ins, I knew I was in for a fun time. Their quick thinking is sadly to no avail, as one of the demons fights through the ice-cold blast of the Lord's sacred liquid, because, and I quote, it doesn't work on Japanese demons. Victorious, the demons then load up on some of the water, leave the ultimately unharmed soldiers, and go home. On the way, our main character sees a thirsty kid and gives him and his family some of the water they just took, giving us our first impression that the demons in the lore of this story aren't actually too bad. We also at this moment learn a name we can call our little dude here, Prince. Upon returning home, Prince is welcomed by an older demon named Thief, who nonchalantly mentions that one of their fellow demons named Slime, possibly a reference to another Toriyama created thing, fell asleep outside in the sun and straight up died. Neither one of them seem all that concerned about it. We then get a quick exposition dump. Around 50 years ago, a mixture of natural disasters and foolish practices of mankind led to the destruction of the world, only leaving behind a desert. A sort of land of sand, if you will.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
This catastrophic event, however, didn't exactly knock any sense into the human race, and they continued fighting an endless amount of wars. In the end, a king rose to power, the wars died down, and the last remaining river dried up. The king is easily able to keep his power, and he rules with an iron fist, all because he controls a secret water source, presumably the only one known to man. The demons that, for whatever reason, have to reside on the Earth's surface as well, they hate the king and the world they see before them. Just then, a little jeep pulls up to their home, and an old man pops out. He introduces himself as Sheriff Rao, and he has a proposition. Prince decides to hear him out, even introducing himself by his real name, Beelzebub. The sheriff tells him that he is searching for a mythical phantom lake he believes exists. He wants to find it and finally free the people of Sandland from the king's grasp, but he needs help. The demons discuss, and the sheriff sweetens the deal by throwing in the only video game system to survive the wars, a PlayStation 6 with a copy of Dragon Quest XIII. Quick side note, it's actually kind of insane that the release of the PlayStation 6 is actually not that far away now in the grand scheme of things. And it's actually really plausible that a Dragon Quest XIII could actually release on it. Anyway, Prince then books it out of there real quick to ask his father for advice. His father, the actual fucking devil, I guess, who seems much more invested in his summer reading, but he tells his son that the man is trustworthy and that he should help him. So Prince and Thief decide to set off with the sheriff. All goes well in the beginning of their journey until the sheriff sees something in the sand and yells that they need to get the fuck out of there quick. A giant monster then emerges from the ground, and our newly acquainted band of heroes narrowly escape by unhooking their supplies, losing all their extra fuel, food, and precious water. The next chapter opens with the gang going over their options. They don't have enough gas to turn back, but luckily there is a nearby town. Rao then asks them if the world really used to be all that much better. And they answer that the world is undoubtedly awful now, but humans have always done awful things. This whole conversation puts one of the most interesting dynamics in this series on full display. Although demons are often characterized as infinitely evil, in this universe, they have a much stricter moral code. They play tricks, but they try not to harm, and they never kill. They are, however, still blamed for everything wrong in this world, although they really did none of it, making their reputation a mere reflection of the horrors and atrocities of man itself. Anyway, the sheriff mentions he's actually killed many people when he fought in the war, and just before they're able to make it into town, they are ambushed by this group of freaks. The sheriff then pretty much single-handedly beats the absolute shit out of them with a little help from Prince. Prince asks him afterwards why he didn't just pop some caps in their asses, and the sheriff reveals that bullets are too hard to come by, and he just keeps his handgun on him for intimidation. The gang is now safe, but since the car is completely immobilized, they are forced to set out on foot. When they finally arrive near the town, Prince sends Thief in to steal some supplies. He dresses like fucking Santa Claus when he does it too, by the way. When Thief returns, he brings food, water, and news of a new vehicle they can use, a tank, which very much interests the sheriff. The beginning of Chapter 3 shows them scouting out and eventually stealing the tank. They then load up their supplies and set off following the old river bank south. The only other thing they encounter in this chapter is towards the end, when they spot something flying in the sky. The sheriff reveals that airplanes are strictly prohibited, and that to his knowledge there weren't even any that still existed. As the floating sphere nears closer, they see the king's emblem on it. Picking up right where the last chapter left off, the king's mysterious aircraft is now hovering above them. They attempt to play it cool by saluting and motioning to the ship that their radio is broken, which works, and it flies off. It's not long after that, however, that the ship eventually gets a report that Tank 104, the very one they just saw, was actually recently stolen. The commanding officer, by the name of General R, orders a full turnaround to pursue the thieves. And when they inevitably catch back up with our boys, they waste no time raining hellfire on them. The sheriff swiftly mans the gun in defense and fires multiple shots squarely into the center of the ship, causing, to the surprise of everyone, water to pour out. And just like that, 90% of the ship's mass falls from the sky. But our guys aren't quite out of the woods yet, because they start dropping fucking airstrikes on their asses, making them essentially sitting ducks until, in a last-ditch effort, utilize some anti-gravity devices on board, and Prince and Thief hop out and deadlift the tank up so it can get a clean shot with the front cannon, finally deterring the threat. Chapter 5 is titled Night Truths, and it holds a lot of big reveals. Firstly, given the ship was coming from the direction they were going, carrying a shit ton of water, they quickly rule that the rumored Phantom Lake and the King's water source are one and the same. Next, they pick up a transmission between General R and a man named Commander Zoo. The sheriff remarks, very surprised that old bastard is still alive, and yeah, I kind of agree. Bro is serving as a high-ranking military official while hooked up to like an iron lung and a whole fucking life support system. I mean, someone get this healthy young man into the US Congress already. The biggest revelation here comes as our heroes make camp for the night. Thief mentions a group of people called the Peaky who were unjustly attacked and wiped out by the King's army near the area they are heading. The sheriff initially defends what was essentially the Holocaust of the Peaky people because he says that they were allegedly building a weapon of mass destruction. But Thief immediately clarifies that that is far from true and just mere propaganda from the king. They were developing a machine, not to destroy, but to create. A machine that would make water. And by extension, a machine the king could not allow to exist, because without the control of the water, he knew his dictatorship could crumble around him. This hits Rao like a damn bag of bricks, because it turns out he was one of the commanding officers in charge of that attack. The bomb that was ultimately dropped killed all his men as well, all the potential witnesses, and he barely escaped with his life and went into hiding. Learning this horrible truth keeps the sheriff awake that night, where he sees Prince climb to the top of some rocks and, in his own words, absorb the power of the night to prepare for the fight ahead of them. He is now fully determined to help the sheriff find that lake by any means necessary. The next chapter opens with the gang gawking over a magazine poster of a woman that the sheriff put up. We are then introduced to a side faction of bounty hunters in the wasteland known as the Swimmers. They aren't all that important, but they do show us a very interesting dynamic. Only the oldest of them has even ever seen water in large enough amounts to swim in. But they all dream of it and romanticize it to the point of naming themselves after it and always wearing their swimsuits. Anyway, one of them has some crazy good eyesight and is able to see the tank, look through the goddamn window at the sheriff, and sketch his exact likeness, all from fucking 85 kilometers away. They sell this image to the government, leading to Sheriff Rao's true identity coming to light. A radio broadcast reveals he is actually the presumed dead war hero, General Shiba. To the surprise of everyone, including Commander Zoo.
Look at you, so young and happy. Where do the years go?
Shiba ends up calling into the radio station himself and gives a statement to the world about his current mission and even directly alludes to knowing the truth of the explosion 30 years ago. Zoo cuts the broadcast, and not long after, General R shows up with a tank brigade. Although he is a bit torn now because of what Shiba alluded to about the explosion. After all, his father was one of the soldiers who died in it. Prince and Shiba work together to immobilize the tanks but not harm any of the king's men, also revealing along the way that this whole time Prince has had the power to read minds and communicate telepathically. He was just too lazy to do it at any point to Shiba before now, I guess. Before leaving, they tell General R the truth of what happened, defeat the swimmers pretty effortlessly after they attempt to collect on the bounty, and then get caught in a nasty sandstorm. It's out of desperation to find shelter that Prince stumbles into a cave and sees an oasis. When Thief and Shiba finally find where Prince disappeared to, it is quickly made clear that this isn't the Phantom Lake they were searching for, because they discover what remains of the Peaky people living there, meaning this definitely isn't the king's water source. So after apologizing relentlessly, our heroes decide that the least they can do is let these people continue to live in the peace that they were able to find here after they suffered so much. As they make their way out, they receive a radio transmission from General R. He had called the king himself, claiming to have been told the truth by Zoo, and the king pretty much confirmed it all for him. He then gives them as much information as possible about the whereabouts of the king's water source, and salutes our protagonists as they travel closer than ever to their true goal. As our heroes inch closer and closer to the water source, R and many of the troops stop responding, and word gets back that the Prince of Demons is helping Sheba. The king and General Zoo begin getting a bit desperate, so they put in an order to their research lab to prepare the insect man, and that Zoo will deliver it himself. Back to our boys, who have made it all the way to the southernmost part of Sandland, they discover something insane. A dam. Water never really became scarce on Earth after all. The king had just built a strategically placed dam to stop the vast amount of water from flowing into Sandland's one river, all for his own profit and power. They agree that they must destroy the dam, but are interrupted by the flying corpse that is Commander Zoo, carrying his little insect monster. Without hesitation, Prince steps up to battle the giant bug, which actually puts up a hell of a fight. Meanwhile, Thief and Sheba make a mad dash back to the tank, while Sheba simultaneously takes some pot shots at Zoo. You know, with that pistol he told everyone was empty. During his treacherous battle with the bug, Prince ends up getting stabbed by it, but just before it can deliver the final killing curb stomp, the Prince of Demons unleashes his true power, and with incredible strength and speed, defeats the Insect Man. Zoo gets pretty fucking cocky though after revealing a bomb was inside the monster, which detonates to injure Prince, and then immediately gets into position to drop a similar payload right on top of the tank. But just before he can do it, he is shot out of the sky by none other than General R and falls to his much-deserved death. In the final pages of this series, we see them use the tanks to destroy the dam, bringing water and life back to Sandland, and forever ending the king's wicked rule. The swimmers show up for this long-awaited moment, and R makes a public announcement of their great accomplishment. In the very end, we see Shiva pulling up to the demon's home just like he did at the beginning of the series. He has returned to tell them he is going on a supply run to deliver some stuff to the Peaky people, and asks if they'd like to go along for old time's sake. As they drive, they pass the swimmers in the water actually learning how to swim, and as always, they bicker about who gets to drive. And that's the end of Sandland. Well, the end of the manga, at least, because surprisingly, their story isn't completely over. This year, about 20 years since the manga ended, marks a sort of revival of the series, actually, in the form of a video game adaptation, which I've heard good things about, and even more importantly, an anime adaptation. Both seem to have had considerable involvement from series creator Akira Toriyama before he passed away. Sadly, right before they were set to come out. The craziest part about this new anime adaptation is that after the first 6 episodes, which cover up to the point I just finished talking about, there is an entirely new season worth of episodes after that. A continuation of the story. I haven't personally got the chance to check either one of these out, but I am so excited. As for my overall thoughts on this series, I could very much tell while reading this that this manga is definitely a passion project. Not something meant to be as large scale as Dragon Ball, but a simple, straightforward adventure that still has a lot of layers to it. It still conveys important themes and displays to us the devastating negative effects of neglecting the planet, pointless conflicts, and the greed of humanity, which, quite frankly, is more important now than ever. It's truly a short and sweet story that says a lot and is sprinkled with classic Toriyama charm all the way through. And I think it's so cool how a 2-decade-old manga that I would have presumed was mostly forgotten can get so much new content and attention so long after it ended. I wholeheartedly recommend that you read or watch it for yourself if you haven't already. There's still so much that you'll get out of it. Man, I can't wait to play that fucking video game too. I mean, it should at least tide me over until the release of Dragon Quest XIII on the PlayStation 6. I want to thank you so much for watching. It really means the most to me. This is the first time I've made a video like this on a comic book, which is pretty exciting and definitely some practice for some other projects I want to do eventually. But above all else, I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, definitely go check out my other review recap style videos. I've made them on a bunch of different things, ranging from single episodes of Samurai Jack to the fucking Courage the Cowardly Dog Scooby-Doo crossover. But that's all I got for this one. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one.
I want some cheeseburgers just to eat. I'm talking ketchup, my nigga mustard on the beat. You gotta put a lot of lettuce, please, because I like to have a lot of grease. I remember eating outside with my whole team. Now a nigga gotta stay home cause of quarantine.